Where do we see the world? What is the state of the world? How are we positioning ourselves within the context of a massive sell-off that has happened in the last couple of weeks? I think State of the Union that we just had a few weeks ago is unfortunately it has to be revised because we had some massive drawdowns. I want to talk about them, of course, talk about how we see the world, how we position ourselves, what is sort of what is our thinking. Maybe that's the easiest way to think about this. And just before I even go there, I want to say these are the times when you have to stick to your principles and have to stick to your strategy. That's why you have principles. That's why you have strategies. This is what these times require. That otherwise, when times are good, when you're printing money, when the upside is there, when it's all falling into place, you can sometimes fall victim to the temptation to just say, "Oh, what is this all? I'm doing well anyway." Well, here's why. You really have to be sure about what you're doing, and that's why you have a principle stack. That's why you have a strategy. So the way we see the world right now, before I go into a more detailed explanation, is the Fed is squeezing out the profits from the market, is squeezing out the fluff, squeezing out the wealth, making everybody rethink their strategies, making everybody do what we're doing here, which is rethink what am I trying to achieve? Why am I here? And second, the fundamentals of our portfolio are good. The fundamentals, the upside, the innovation, the new concepts and engineering practices that are being applied are intact and they're as good as they've ever been. The problem, of course, is that the stocks are not reflecting that right now for various reasons, and that's why we have a drawdown. This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's October 14th, 2022. This is Krim Telco. For the day, the fund is down 4.5%. The market's down 2.5%. For the year, we're down 51%. The market's down 25.7%, while performing by 25.3%. So this is the way we see the world. We have two massive factors that are playing right now. One is the Fed is squeezing out the wealth out of the market because the Fed's fighting inflation. The goal is to bring people back to work and to stop people from speculating in things like the housing market or Bitcoin or any other kind of speculative asset. This is what the Fed is trying to achieve. Now, the explicit goal is to bring down inflation. The actual practical effect of that is that people stop speculating, that they go back to work, and also they undo the pandemic, call it the pandemic bonus, which is the fact that people just don't go to work and still get paid. So that is the fundamental reason why we have this massive drawdown in the market. The other side of the coin, of course, much more important for us, is okay, what are we invested in and what are we trying to achieve? And this is where the principal stack comes in. We're invested, our portfolio is mainly concentrated on Tesla and the CRISPR index. And what we're trying to achieve with Orange Capital Partners is to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. The reason we do that is because we want to impact positive change to the world. We've said many times, we see ourselves as employees looking for work. We want to employ our capital, so we don't actually work necessarily in a sense like employees, but we employ our capital with the kinds of companies and engineering practices that we think are worthwhile for various reasons. We have an elaborate system on our website explaining all of these things. Fundamentally, we have a principal stack. We invest in things along the lines of 0 to 1, the book by Peter Thiel, which talks about what kind of entrepreneur is most likely to generate wealth. Then we have another part of our principal stack, which is the innovation stack by Jim McKelvey, which explains in more practical detail how innovation stacks are built. It's a Popperian approach to business. You solve problems, you create new problems, you solve them, you create better problems, you solve them. Then we have Clayton Christensen's the innovator's dilemma, which is explaining wealth creation from a competitive standpoint, or from a sort of, if you want to think about it from the theory of competition, and the idea of the competitive response, which is critical also. This goes back to Peter Thiel, that everything is driven by competition. In other words, competition is the one thing which actually erodes returns, and one way to avoid that is by having the kind of products and services that are disruptive, and that's what Clayton Christian's talking about. And then the last big chunk of our principle stack, which puts everything together, is the beginning of infinity by David Deutsch. So those are, and David Deutsch is really a modern manifestation of Karl Popper, and that is that there's no such thing as the truth. There's no such thing as experts or people that are in the know. There is this constant quest for solutions to problems, and a continuous solutions to better problems, and so on and so forth. That's really the essence of how we invest. I think the ultimate purpose is to generate wealth. The measure of wealth is freedom. So what we're really after is actually freedom. Now, I don't want to go further than that in terms of why we're doing, what the purpose is, what's the purpose of freedom and all that. It's really, that's a different conversation. But we're back to square one here now in terms of this particular episode. I've explained, hopefully, in good terms, what it is we're trying to achieve, and how does this fit into our environment right now. I think once we look at the world from our perspective, it's not so bad. There is a lot of innovation going on. There's two courses that we're currently taking on top. Actually, there's three courses. I'm sorry. There's one that we've been taking for a while. It's Computer Architecture by Ornul Mutlu. That is a course that we put on hold for now because there's two courses that we're taking. One is Reinforcement Learning by DeepMind, and the other is Andrej Karpathy's Introduction and Build Up. Actually, it's a very good course in terms of building up models for language models, because we believe that we're in a sort of ImageNet moment in these weeks or months, where we have massive breakthroughs in language models, we have massive breakthroughs in transformers, things like that, along those lines. I don't want to go into detail what they are right now, but what's important for hopefully our audience here is just, I want to give people, the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And what you do when you're down 51%. Well, you just keep grinding, you keep working on the things that you think in the long term will work towards achieving your mission. You can't be taken sort of out of your context. You can't start doing things that are potentially detrimental to your future just because the current environment is tough. You can't do that. You have to stick with your guns, and sticking with our guns means taking those courses. I've said many times that reading, learning, understanding the future starts with understanding the current science and technologies that are potentially going to translate into future businesses. This is what we're doing. Taking those courses with Karpathy and with DeepMind, I think, are key, because reinforcement learning is the key to AI in the future, and language models are a big breakthrough that can be used in many applications. From my point of view, all of these things are just semantics. In the end, these models will be used for any kind of intelligence defined as a means to solve problems. This is really what we're trying to achieve here as a human race, as a scientific community, and as an investment community. So these are all important factors that I hope we're able to get across, that in times like this, when it's really tough, you have to manage your portfolio such that you're ready for the rebound, because the big money is made when the rebound happens. It's not there's another big lesson that I want to bring across, and we've had that conversation just today with some of our clients, which is that, look, you can try to time the market. You can try to time the market in a sense that you sell at the highs, you buy at the lows. It is my belief that there's no such technology or knowledge available to us to do that. And I think it's almost implicit. So this is not just because we have a lack of knowledge, but because knowledge creation is is very difficult to understand. We don't understand it right now, and wealth creation is part of knowledge creation, and therefore it's very hard to time it. That's all I'm saying. In the long run, there is potential, hopefully, and that's what we're betting on at Orange Capital Partners, that in the long run we can actually predict knowledge creation and wealth creation and the generation of freedom through products and services. But in the short run, the timing of these things, particularly the sort of macro whims that sometimes we're exposed to as investors, they're not predictable, and therefore we don't want to spend time trying to predict them, and we don't want to be in a position where we, let's say, get out of everything, maybe save a few percent of performance and then miss the return, miss the rebound. This is the fundamental reason why we stay put. Because some people might ask us, well, why are you staying put? Why don't you just sell everything and then buy it back when things recover? Well, by the time things recover, it is you're going to miss out a lot of the upside. And here's why. Like, let's say in this particular scenario that we're in right now, we have basically what's going to happen is that the Federal Reserve of the United States will at some point pivot. They will pivot, and it is our view that that pivot will happen relatively soon. So once that pivot happens, the markets will rebound very sharply. By the time we feel change in the economy, in other words, by the time we feel unemployment going up, inflation coming down, housing prices coming down, the market will have rebound probably 30, 40, 50%, or our portfolio, and the market maybe 10 to 20%. And now, you can then still buy, of course, but the point here is that trading around these things is not what we want to do. What we're doing, though, and I just want to be clear, we have a little bit of leverage in the system. We started with 10% leverage. Unfortunately, now we have 25% leverage, or in other words, we're managing the leverage such that we don't go over 25% leverage. That's just the way we manage the fund. It's a relatively arbitrary number, but it's supposed to keep us sane. It's supposed to keep us safe. And it's obviously also kind of you can argue that we shouldn't have leverage. We decided to have leverage, and this is the way we manage it. We keep it at 25%. So when we go over 25%, we do sell just to keep the leverage on the 25%. Leverage defined as the amount of cash we borrow divided by the net asset value of the fund. So the leverage is something that, this is for another podcast. Well, we have some leverage, and unfortunately it's biting us now, and that's a bad thing, and that's part of the risk of running a fund. And I think my suggestion to people that use leverage is keep it at a certain number and be very religious about managing that number such that it always stays within the realm of something you can stomach. So let's get back to the more interesting parts of today's episode. Again, I think most importantly is that it's good to know why things are the way they are, even if they're bad. It's good to know why. And the reason they are the way they are is because the Federal Reserve, and actually whatever the Federal Reserve is doing is a good thing. So overall, the whole situation, I would say, as a sort of macroeconomic backdrop, is actually a good thing. We have tightening of money, we have more responsibility in businesses. Unfortunately, as investors, we are exposed to the whims of the market, and that's part of it. Now, let me just finish this episode with one more comment, and that is that a lot of people who are invested in Tesla or in our fund, which is highly invested in Tesla, are of the impression that we're at the whims of let's say, Elon Musk and all his involvement. Now, to be clear, I think what Musk is doing right now with the Ukraine is not very productive, and I'm a bit scared for his safety. But other than that, I would say that he is actually the Tesla stock is trading like a stock. It's not trading like some teenage crazy reflection of Musk's mind, and that's a good thing. Doesn't mean that if something happens to Musk, we could have a massive drawdown. I think that could happen, but nevertheless, the good news is that Tesla is trading like a real company with real fundamentals, and the fundamentals are sales and volume growth. That's the main metric, and then also margins. The margins are very high. They will come back a little bit, most likely, particularly in a deflationary environment. Nevertheless, I think the fundamentals are strong, the demand is very strong, and that is a very, very good sign for Tesla. And we have the impression that it's going to continue, and that is the key fundamental. That is the key fundamental thesis behind our investment in Tesla. As far as our biotech index is concerned, the same thing. The problems that they're solving are so massive, that the markets are so big, that we have a lot of confidence in the value creation potential of these stocks. And for Bitcoin, Bitcoin as a money has a fundamental value. We've spoken about this when we discussed the Bitcoin standard, and we believe that certainly from an appreciation perspective, there's a lot of room left. In terms of the societal impact of Bitcoin, again, that's for another podcast. So to summarize, the state of the world that we see right now is the Fed is squeezing out money and wealth from people so they go back to work and get back to basics. It starts with the government, but it goes back to the individual, and that's a good thing. As far as our portfolio is concerned, we're still religiously following our principal stack, and the mission of our fund is to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. And nothing has changed on that front. The only thing we have to do is manage our leverage, which we're doing. The big innovations that are happening right now, in particular in AI, the breakthroughs in transformers and language models are incredibly optimistic for the future. The implication of AI, particularly as it pertains to Tesla, are massive, and therefore also the value creation potential. Thank you.